They passed him every day without a glance. Just a janitor, they thought. Until the colonel walked past the officer's table, pulled up a chair beside him, and said, "Mind if I join you, sir?" The whole mess hall stopped. So did the whispers. Lieutenant Jessica Parker had been assigned to Naval Special Warfare Training Center for exactly 5 weeks. At 5 feet 6 inches with short blonde hair and steady blue eyes, she moved through her duties with the quiet efficiency that characterized most military medical personnel. She carried her medical supplies with practiced precision, treated injuries with clinical competence, and maintained the kind of professional demeanor that made her blend seamlessly into the background of intense SEAL training operations. To the candidates and most of the staff, she was simply another capable nurse doing her job, competent, reliable, and completely unremarkable. The SEAL candidates barely acknowledged her presence beyond the necessary medical interactions. She was medical support, nothing more. They knew she was professional in her approach, thorough in her examinations, and dependable when injuries required attention. But none of them had ever wondered about her background, her previous assignments, or what experiences had shaped her into the person she'd become. To them, she was just another military nurse providing support services while they focused on the real business of becoming warriors. But in the cafeteria each day, there was someone else who drew even less attention than Lieutenant Parker. Frank Morrison had been working as a janitor at the training facility for over 3 years. At 58, with graying hair, weathered hands, and the kind of invisible presence that comes with service jobs, he moved through the facility cleaning, maintaining, and performing the countless small tasks that kept the training center functioning. He ate his meals alone at a corner table in the mess hall, reading paperback novels or newspapers while the officers, instructors, and candidates filled the room with conversation about training, tactics, and military careers. Welcome to Silent Salute, where we discover that extraordinary capabilities often hide behind the most ordinary appearances. Before we continue this incredible story, tell us in the comments which country you're watching from today. And if you believe that the most dangerous assumptions are those we make about people who seem completely unremarkable, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We're honored to share these remarkable stories with you. Class 302 was particularly challenging. 28 candidates from diverse military backgrounds, all pushing themselves through training designed to break all but the most determined warriors. The daily routine was relentless: brutal physical conditioning, advanced weapons training, tactical simulations, and psychological challenges that tested every aspect of human endurance and determination. Through it all, Lieutenant Parker provided medical support with the same steady competence that had characterized her entire assignment, while Frank Morrison quietly maintained the facility that made their training possible. The candidates had developed their standard assumptions about both individuals. Lieutenant Parker was professional medical support who kept them healthy enough to continue training. Frank Morrison was invisible maintenance staff who emptied trash cans and mopped floors. Neither seemed to warrant particular attention or consideration beyond their obvious functional roles in the training environment. Among the candidates was Staff Sergeant David Chun, a former Marine Corps infantry leader who'd served multiple combat deployments before applying for SEAL training. Chun was respected by his fellow candidates for his tactical knowledge and leadership abilities, but he shared the common assumption that support personnel operated outside the warrior culture that defined special operations. The medical staff knows their job, Chun had commented to his teammate during their 4th week, but they don't really understand what we're preparing for out here. They see the injuries, but they don't see the bigger picture. Petty Officer Williams, who'd served as a hospital corpsman before SEAL training, offered some perspective. Medical personnel understand more than you might think, Chun. They've seen the consequences of what we do. But Chun's attitude reflected the broader disconnect that existed between combat personnel and support staff throughout the military. Medical personnel and facility maintenance were respected for their functions, but they weren't considered part of the warrior culture that defined special operations training. The situation that would change everything began during the 6th week of training when Class 302 was scheduled for advanced electronic warfare exercises. This was one of the most sophisticated phases of SEAL training, where candidates learned to operate in environments dominated by enemy surveillance, electronic countermeasures, and drone technology that could detect and target special operations forces. The training was being conducted in a specialized facility designed to simulate realistic electronic warfare scenarios. Candidates would learn to identify, evade, and if necessary, neutralize various types of surveillance and attack drones that they might encounter in operational environments. Lieutenant Parker was assigned to provide medical support for the training evolution, positioned at a safe distance from the electronic warfare exercises, but close enough to respond immediately if accidents occurred. Her role was essentially observational. Monitor the candidates for signs of injury or distress, be prepared for emergency medical treatment, and ensure that anyone hurt received immediate care. The training facility was equipped with multiple types of drones designed to test candidate responses to aerial surveillance and potential attack scenarios. The exercises were carefully controlled, with multiple safety protocols and experienced instructors supervising every aspect of the training to ensure that candidates learned essential skills without unnecessary risk. During a particularly complex exercise involving multiple surveillance drones, something went wrong with the automated safety systems. One of the training drones, a medium-sized quadcopter designed to simulate enemy reconnaissance equipment, malfunctioned and began operating outside its programmed parameters. Instead of following its predetermined flight pattern at a safe altitude, the drone began descending rapidly toward the training area where candidates were conducting tactical exercises. The malfunction had disabled the remote control systems, leaving instructors unable to redirect or recall the aircraft. Drone malfunction, the primary instructor shouted over the training area communication system. All personnel take immediate cover. Automated recall system has failed. The candidates immediately sought cover, understanding that an out-of-control drone posed serious risks of injury from impact or from the spinning rotor blades that could cause severe lacerations. The instructors were working frantically to regain control of the aircraft, but the technical malfunction had made normal intervention impossible. The drone continued its erratic descent, moving unpredictably through the airspace above the training area. Its flight pattern was becoming increasingly dangerous, threatening not just the candidates, but also the instructors and support personnel who were trying to manage the emergency situation. Lieutenant Parker was approximately 50 yards from the main area of drone activity, positioned at her medical station where she could observe the training evolution. She watched the unfolding emergency with the kind of professional assessment that came from years of military medical training, evaluating potential injury scenarios, and preparing to respond to whatever casualties might result from the malfunction. But what happened next shocked everyone in the training area. Instead of seeking cover or waiting for the technical staff to resolve the malfunction, Lieutenant Parker did something that defied everything the candidates thought they knew about their quiet nurse. She reached into her medical bag and pulled out what appeared to be a small, handheld device that none of the candidates recognized. She pointed the device at the malfunctioning drone, made some rapid adjustments to its settings, and then activated it with the kind of calm confidence that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The out-of-control drone suddenly stopped its erratic flight pattern, hovered motionless for several seconds, and then began a controlled descent to a safe landing area away from personnel. Within 30 seconds, the aircraft was on the ground, its rotors stopped, and the emergency was over. The training area fell into complete silence. 28 SEAL candidates, multiple instructors, and technical staff stood frozen, staring at a military nurse who had just neutralized a malfunctioning drone with what appeared to be some kind of electronic countermeasures device. Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the senior instructor who'd been trying to regain control of the drone through conventional methods, approached Lieutenant Parker with an expression of complete amazement. "Lieutenant Parker," Rodriguez said, "what did you just do?" Lieutenant Parker was calmly returning the device to her medical bag, as if nothing unusual had happened. "I used an electronic countermeasures device to override the drone's flight systems and force a controlled landing." Rodriguez had been involved in electronic warfare training for over 15 years, and he recognized advanced technology when he saw it. "Lieutenant, that device isn't standard medical equipment. Where did you get it, and how did you know how to use it?" Lieutenant Parker's response was characteristically understated. "Previous training, Master Chief. I've had some experience with electronic warfare systems." But Rodriguez could see that Lieutenant Parker's previous training was far more extensive than she was indicating. The device she'd used and the skill with which she'd operated it suggested advanced technical knowledge that went far beyond standard military medical training. "Lieutenant," Rodriguez said, "what you just demonstrated was sophisticated electronic warfare capability. That's not typically part of medical personnel training." Lieutenant Parker continued organizing her medical supplies while responding. "I've received additional training to enhance my effectiveness in challenging operational environments." Rodriguez was clearly understanding that Lieutenant Parker's additional training represented capabilities that exceeded those of most military technical specialists. "Lieutenant, would you mind if I asked about your background?" That was extremely advanced electronic warfare technique. For the first time since her assignment to the training facility, Lieutenant Parker seemed to be considering how much information to share about her capabilities and experience. "Master Chief, my previous assignments required specialized training that included electronic systems, countermeasures, and threat neutralization in technology-intensive environments." The candidates were processing what they'd witnessed, trying to understand how their routine medical support officer had demonstrated electronic warfare capabilities that exceeded their own training in advanced military technology. Staff Sergeant Chen approached Lieutenant Parker with obvious respect and curiosity. "Ma'am, what you just did was incredible. Where did you learn to operate electronic countermeasures equipment like that?" Lieutenant Parker's response maintained operational security while providing some insight into her background. Previous assignments involved environments where medical personnel needed additional capabilities to ensure mission success in electronically contested areas. But Chun was beginning to understand that Lieutenant Parker's background was far more complex and sophisticated than anyone had realized. "Ma'am, those weren't just basic countermeasures. You neutralized that drone with precision that suggests extensive training in electronic warfare systems." Petty Officer Williams, who'd been observing the entire incident, stepped forward with new understanding. "Ma'am, that device you used, it's not anything I've seen in standard military inventories. Where did you acquire equipment like that?" Lieutenant Parker looked at Williams with the kind of measured assessment that suggested she was calculating how much information to reveal about her capabilities and assignments. "The equipment represents specialized technology that's used in certain operational environments where electronic threats are primary concerns." The phrase specialized technology, combined with her demonstration of advanced electronic warfare techniques, was creating a clear picture for the candidates. They were beginning to understand that Lieutenant Parker had been assigned to units that operated with technology and capabilities that exceeded standard military equipment. Rodriguez, who'd been trying to understand the technical aspects of what Lieutenant Parker had accomplished, asked the question that everyone was thinking. "Lieutenant, are you saying that you have access to electronic warfare technology that's not part of standard military systems?" Lieutenant Parker's response was carefully worded to maintain appropriate operational security. "I'm saying that some military assignments require access to specialized equipment and training that enables personnel to operate effectively in electronically contested environments." The implication was clear. Lieutenant Parker had served with units that had access to advanced technology and training that wasn't available to conventional military forces. Later that day, Rodriguez requested a private meeting with Lieutenant Parker to discuss the incident and her background in more detail. "Lieutenant Parker," Rodriguez began, "I need to understand your capabilities and experience. What you demonstrated today suggests training and equipment access that goes far beyond standard military medical personnel." Lieutenant Parker had clearly decided that some level of transparency was necessary given the public nature of her demonstration. "Master Chief, I've served in assignments that required integration of medical and electronic warfare capabilities. The training I received was designed to enable medical personnel to operate independently in technology-intensive threat environments." Rodriguez was beginning to understand the implications of Lieutenant Parker's background. "Lieutenant, are you saying you've been assigned to units that specialize in electronic warfare operations?" "I'm saying I've received training that enabled me to provide medical support in environments where electronic threats were primary operational concerns, and where traditional medical protocols had to be adapted to account for technological challenges." Rodriguez pressed for more specific information. "Lieutenant, your demonstration today showed familiarity with advanced countermeasures technology. Can you provide any details about your training in electronic warfare systems? Lieutenant Parker's response reflected the balance between transparency and maintaining appropriate operational security. Master Chief, I've served with units that conducted operations requiring specialized electronic capabilities. The training I received included systems operation, threat assessment, and countermeasures deployment in electronically contested environments. Rodriguez was recognizing that Lieutenant Parker was being deliberately general about assignments that were clearly highly classified and technologically advanced. Lieutenant, would you be willing to discuss how your background might contribute to enhancing our electronic warfare training programs? Lieutenant Parker considered the question carefully. Master Chief, I believe my experience could contribute to developing more realistic training scenarios that better prepare candidates for operational environments where electronic threats are primary concerns. Rodriguez was intrigued by the possibility of integrating Lieutenant Parker's capabilities into the training curriculum. Lieutenant, what kind of training scenarios are you thinking about? Scenarios where medical personnel need to operate in electronically contested environments, where traditional communication systems are compromised, and where medical and electronic warfare responsibilities intersect in complex operational situations. Rodriguez understood that Lieutenant Parker was offering to share training methodologies and technological insights that came from highly classified operational experience with advanced electronic warfare systems. Lieutenant, I'm very interested in developing such training programs. Would you be willing to work with our technical staff to develop enhanced electronic warfare scenarios that incorporate medical considerations? Lieutenant Parker accepted the opportunity, understanding that her unique combination of medical expertise and electronic warfare capabilities could contribute to SEAL training in ways that would significantly enhance operational effectiveness in modern threat environments. The announcement of Lieutenant Parker's expanded role created significant interest and excitement throughout the training command. The incident with the malfunctioning drone had established her credibility as someone with exceptional technical capabilities, and her willingness to contribute to enhanced training confirmed that her experience was valued at the highest levels. Shin approached Lieutenant Parker after the announcement. Ma'am, after seeing what you did with that drone, several of us have been wondering about your background. Would you be willing to share some insights about operating in electronically contested environments? Lieutenant Parker appreciated Chin's professional interest. Chin, my expanded role will include developing training scenarios that reflect realistic electronic warfare challenges. You'll be experiencing that training as part of your enhanced curriculum. Chin pressed for more details about Lieutenant Parker's background and capabilities. Ma'am, what you demonstrated wasn't just technical knowledge. It was real-world experience with advanced electronic warfare systems. How did you develop those capabilities? Lieutenant Parker decided that some transparency would be beneficial for the training environment. Chun, I've been assigned to units that operated in environments where electronic warfare was the primary operational challenge. You can't provide effective medical support if you can't function in electronically contested areas where traditional communication and navigation systems are compromised. Chin was impressed by Lieutenant Parker's integrated approach to capability development. Ma'am, do you think all medical personnel should receive electronic warfare training? I think medical personnel who support special operations should understand that modern battlefields are defined by electronic warfare. Medical emergencies don't occur in environments where electronic systems work perfectly. They happen in contested areas where electronic countermeasures, jamming, and cyber attacks are primary threats. Williams, who'd been listening to the conversation, asked about the broader implications of Lieutenant Parker's perspective. Ma'am, does your electronic warfare training actually change how you approach medical procedures? Lieutenant Parker's answer reflected years of successfully integrating diverse technical capabilities. Absolutely. Understanding electronic threats helps me anticipate communication failures, navigation problems, and equipment malfunctions that can complicate medical procedures. Understanding countermeasures technology helps me maintain medical capabilities when traditional systems are compromised. The candidates were fascinated by Lieutenant Parker's perspective, recognizing that they were receiving insights from someone who'd successfully integrated medical and electronic warfare capabilities in ways they'd never considered. Meanwhile, in the mess hall during lunch, Frank Morrison continued his routine of eating alone at his corner table, reading a paperback novel while the facility buzzed with conversation about Lieutenant Parker's demonstration and her expanded role in training operations. To most personnel, he remained invisible, just the maintenance worker who kept the facility clean and functional. But that afternoon, something unusual happened that would reveal another hidden story within the training center. Colonel Patricia Hayes arrived for an unscheduled inspection of the facility. As Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare, Colonel Hayes was one of the most senior officers in the special operations community, with a reputation for demanding excellence and maintaining the highest standards of operational readiness. Colonel Hayes moved through the facility with the kind of authoritative presence that made everyone straighten their posture and sharpen their focus. She observed training evolutions, spoke with instructors, and reviewed candidate performance with the detailed attention that had made her legendary throughout the military. During the lunch period, Colonel Hayes entered the mess hall to observe the informal interactions between personnel. She walked through the facility, noting the conversations, the social dynamics, and the overall atmosphere that characterized the training environment. As she moved through the mess hall, Colonel Hayes's attention was caught by the lone figure of Frank Morrison, sitting at his corner table with a paperback book and a simple lunch. But instead of continuing past him as everyone else did, Colonel Hayes stopped. She looked at Morrison carefully, and something in her expression suggested recognition, not just of a facility maintenance worker, but of something much more significant. Colonel Hayes approached Morrison's table, and what happened next shocked everyone in the mess hall. She pulled up a chair beside Morrison and said, "Mind if I join you, sir?" The entire mess hall fell silent. The word "sir" hung in the air like a physical presence, creating confusion and amazement among everyone present. A colonel didn't address janitors as sir, unless there was something fundamentally different about the situation. Morrison looked up from his book, and for the first time since anyone could remember, his demeanor changed. The invisible maintenance worker straightened slightly, and something in his eyes suggested capabilities and experience that no one had suspected. "Colonel Hayes," Morrison said quietly, "it's been a long time." The conversation was quiet, but the body language was unmistakable. This wasn't a senior officer being polite to facility staff. This was a meeting between military professionals who clearly had shared history and mutual respect. The candidates and staff in the mess hall were trying to process what they were witnessing. The janitor they'd ignored for months was being treated with obvious respect by one of the most senior officers in special operations. "Frank," Colonel Hayes said, "I heard about Lieutenant Parker's demonstration today. Impressive work." Morrison nodded. "She's got good instincts and solid training. Reminded me of some operations we used to run." The casual reference to operations we used to run created even more confusion among the listening personnel. Janitors didn't typically have operational experience with senior special operations officers. Colonel Hayes leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice, but not enough to prevent nearby personnel from overhearing. "Frank, I've been wondering when you were going to get tired of the maintenance cover and get back to what you do best." The word "cover" hit the mess hall like a physical blow. The janitor they'd been ignoring wasn't a maintenance worker. He was someone operating undercover, with a background and capabilities that no one had suspected. Morrison smiled slightly, the first time anyone could remember seeing any expression other than quiet professionalism. "The maintenance work is honest labor, Patricia, but I admit I missed the technical challenges." Colonel Hayes nodded understanding. "Frank, we've got some situations developing that could use your particular expertise. Interested in consulting on some projects?" Morrison considered the offer carefully. "What kind of projects?" "Electronic warfare training development. Advanced countermeasures systems. The kind of work you used to do before you decided you needed a break from the classified world." The references to electronic warfare expertise and classified work were creating a clear picture for everyone listening. The janitor they'd ignored was actually someone with advanced technical capabilities and experience in highly classified operations. Morrison looked around the mess hall, noting the attention their conversation was receiving. "Might be time to come out of retirement, I suppose." Colonel Hayes smiled. "Frank, you were never really retired. You were just taking a break from the spotlight." She stood up from the table, but before leaving, she made an announcement that would change everything about how the facility understood Morrison's presence. "Attention everyone," Colonel Hayes said. her voice carrying throughout the mess hall. "I'd like you to meet Chief Warrant Officer Frank Morrison, retired, formerly of the Army's most classified electronic warfare unit. For the past 3 years, he's been providing facility maintenance services while keeping an eye on training operations and candidate development." The revelation hit the mess hall like a physical explosion. The janitor they'd been ignoring for years was actually a retired chief warrant officer with expertise in the most advanced electronic warfare systems in the military. Chief Morrison, Colonel Hayes continued, developed many of the electronic countermeasure systems that Lieutenant Parker demonstrated today. His work formed the foundation for modern battlefield electronic warfare capabilities. Morrison stood up, and for the first time, everyone in the mess hall could see him clearly, not as invisible maintenance staff, but as a military professional whose contributions had shaped the technology that protected special operations forces worldwide. "Chief Morrison has been observing your training and development for 3 years," Colonel Hayes explained. "His assessments of candidate character, dedication, and potential have been part of the evaluation process that determines who advances in SEAL training." The candidates began to understand that the man they'd ignored had actually been evaluating them throughout their training, that his observations had influenced their progress through the program. Chun, who'd never spoken to Morrison despite eating in the same mess hall for months, approached with obvious respect and embarrassment. "Chief Morrison, sir, I had no idea. We all thought." Morrison's response was understanding. "You thought I was just a janitor. That was the point. You can learn a lot about people by how they treat those they think are beneath them." Williams asked the question everyone was thinking. "Chief, you've been watching us for 3 years. What have you learned?" Morrison's answer reflected years of careful observation. "I've learned that some of you have the character to become true special operations professionals, and some of you are just here for the prestige. The difference shows in how you treat people you think can't help your career." The conversation that followed revolutionized how everyone at the training facility understood both Lieutenant Parker and Chief Morrison. They weren't just support personnel. They were highly experienced professionals whose expertise exceeded that of most military personnel. Over the following weeks, both Lieutenant Parker and Chief Morrison transitioned from their cover roles to active participation in training development. Their combined expertise in medical procedures and electronic warfare created training scenarios that were far more realistic and challenging than anything previously available. "What we're developing," Colonel Hayes explained to the training staff, "is integrated training that reflects the reality of modern special operations. Medical emergencies occur in electronically contested environments. Electronic warfare operations require medical support. These capabilities must be integrated, not separated." Lieutenant Parker and Chief Morrison worked together to create training scenarios that tested candidates' ability to operate effectively when traditional systems failed, when electronic countermeasures compromised communications, and when medical emergencies occurred during complex technical operations. The training programs they developed were eventually adopted throughout Special Operations Commands, establishing new standards for integrated electronic warfare and medical capabilities. Their work influenced military training worldwide and enhanced the effectiveness of special operations personnel globally. But perhaps their greatest contribution was demonstrating that the most valuable expertise often comes from the most unexpected sources, that the people we overlook or take for granted may be the ones with the most important contributions to make. The story of Lieutenant Parker and Chief Morrison became legendary at the training facility, shared with new classes as an example of how dangerous it can be to make assumptions about people based on their apparent roles or positions. The most important lesson you can learn here, instructors would tell new candidates, is that extraordinary capabilities often hide behind ordinary appearances. The person you ignore today might be the person whose expertise saves your life tomorrow. Years later, when both Lieutenant Parker and Chief Morrison had transitioned to other assignments, their legacy lived on in the enhanced training programs they developed and in the understanding that true professional excellence often comes from the most unexpected sources. Their story reminded everyone that in special operations, as in life, the most dangerous assumptions are those we make about people who seem unremarkable, because the most remarkable people are often those who choose to hide their capabilities behind ordinary appearances. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever discovered that someone you overlooked or took for granted actually possessed extraordinary expertise or experience? Have you encountered people whose true capabilities were hidden behind ordinary appearances or humble positions? Tell us in the comments about the moments when you realized you'd underestimated someone whose expertise exceeded your own. And if you believe that the most valuable people are often those who don't need to advertise their capabilities, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. Every story reminds us that extraordinary abilities often hide behind ordinary appearances, and that the people we notice least may be the ones with the most to teach us. We'll see you in the next story, where we'll discover another incredible tale of hidden expertise and unexpected capability.